Mr. President, about 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to meet with leaders in the agricultural community to go over certain issues that are available to our farmers. I met with the NRCS Chief, Jason Weller. I met with the Maryland State Agricultural Secretary, Buddy Hance, and Lee McDaniels, who is a Harford County, Maryland farmer who's president of the National Association of Soil Conservation Districts. And we were talking about ways in which we work together in the agricultural community and concerned about our environment so that we can have a clean environment and a healthy agricultural industry in our state. I must tell you, I found the discussion to be extremely helpful. We talked about the regional conservation partnership programs, and I want to thank Senator Stabenow for her incredible leadership on the Farm Bill and when we reauthorized it. And we consolidated a lot of the conservation programs, particularly for specific great water bodies, into the regional conservation partnership program. It provided new energy and tools available for conservation within agriculture so that we could have a clean environment and we could also have sustainable agriculture in our country. Just recently, the Chesapeake Bay watershed was designated as one of the critical conservation areas. That becomes important because that allows a certain amount of the funds under the regional conservation partnership programs to be available to the critical conservation areas in our country to be used by our farmers to conserve their land, to be better stewards of the land, better stewards of our environment, at the same time have a sustainable agricultural program. The Chesapeake Bay program that was started many years ago, first under the leadership of then Governor Harry Hughes of Maryland, working with the governors of Pennsylvania, the governors of Delaware, expanded to include the states of New York and West Virginia, and Virginia, of course, worked together to establish the Chesapeake Bay program. It was, they understood that for it to be successful, they had to deal with storm runoff, development issues, no question about it. The hardened surface, the loss of forestry land in the Chesapeake Bay watershed causes the pollutants that are in the soil, in our environment through surges to rush into our water systems, into our streams, our rivers, and into the Chesapeake Bay, and that we have to do a better job in development in dealing with storm runoff. It also recognized the responsibility of local governments. They are the primary entity responsible for how we treat our waste through the wastewater treatment facility plants, how we could do a better job in preventing pollutants from entering our water system. We also dealt with business growth and pollution coming in through business activities. But one of the major focal points was how do we deal with agriculture? In one sense, agriculture is very positive for our environment. Maintaining open space is important, and agricultural activities are generally open space. So that can be good because it gives us a larger tract of land in order to filter rainwater, to filter the pollutants from perhaps never entering the bay, but if they do enter the water system, they enter in a way that's already been filtered. So in that sense, agricultural preservation is important for the conservation of the bay. But because of farming activities that use nitrogen and use phosphorus, it can cause significant challenges for the bay. Maryland farmers, I think, have done a good job. They've done a good job for many years. But I want to talk about one farmer particularly because I was very pleased. What I did before this meeting, I had a chance to meet Hank Suching. He's a farmer in Baltimore County, Maryland. Now that's pretty close to the urban centers, as you were referring to the senator from Baltimore. I'm a proud resident of Baltimore. Mr. Suching's farm is only a few miles from my house. And it's interesting, he has a beef cattle farming activity. It's in the Oregon branch of the Gwynns Falls River, which has been dammed to provide for the Loch Raven Reservoir, which deals with our water supply. In other words, that stream that is part of his cattle production is in the watershed that goes into the drinking water that you and I drink in the Baltimore region. So we all have a significant interest in making sure that that water supply is kept safe, and that we have, when we turn on our tap, when we drink our water, it's fresh water. Now, Mr. Suching's farm activities produce about 30 beef calves a year. That's an important number, because in order for that cattle population to be properly grazed, it needs to have a water supply, and it needs to have a place where the cattle can cool off, particularly on a hot day like we saw yesterday. So the traditional farming activities for this cattle production was to allow the cattle to, as I said, the stream goes right through his property, for the cattle to use the stream for the purposes of cooling off and for the purposes of the drinking water for the cattle itself. But that was not the best way to do it for the purposes of protecting the water supply of Baltimore and to deal with the Chesapeake Bay and to deal with our environment. Because, as you know, the use of the cattle, free access to the river, meant that the cattle manure, the phosphorus, would go into the waters, causing a challenge for the water system, and it caused significant erosion to the stream bed itself. So what Mr. Suching did, he felt a commitment to help the environment. So he said, look, why don't I look at fencing in the riverbed so that my cattle does not get direct access to the stream, and producing a supplemental water system through a water trough that you see here, works through gravity, uses the aquifer, works through gravity, and produces direct water for the cattle to be able to drink from. Now here's the interesting part. His principal motivation was that he wanted to do something that would help the environment, but he still wanted to be able to produce his cattle. He felt an obligation to do this. Now, the state of Maryland had help for him. Under partnerships with the federal government and conservation programs, there were funds available to help him fence in the property, to have a sensible crossing, because he was on both sides of the creek, so that he could have a way that the cattle could cross safely and still protect the waterbed itself. That program made it more financially advantageous for him to put in the fencing so that cattle did not have direct access to the stream, and to put in the water trough so that they could get fresh water. But guess what? He put a pencil to it and found out it was better economically for him to do this. It actually made his farming practices more financially viable. Now, how did that happen? Well, you see, he was losing calves every season to storms when there was water surges and they get caught in the stream and they actually drowned. He was losing calves because of extreme weather. Being in the stream caused hypothermia for the calf and actually died. So every time he lost a calf, it was about $1,000 he lost. And this was a sound investment from the point of view of the financial viability of his cattle production. And also, he found that it was healthier for his cattle in two respects. First, the water supply did not include the pathogens that can be found in the streams, so he found it was healthier for his cattle to get water through the trough rather than through the stream itself. And then secondly, he said the growth around the stream increased dramatically because the cattle were not in the stream, and it gave better shade on the property to allow the cattle to be able to cool off through the shade in a more efficient way than going into the stream itself. My point is this. This is just one example. I could give hundreds of examples where conservation makes sense for agriculture and our environment. And my reason for being at this farm, my reason for for bringing together the leaders in agriculture in Maryland is to talk about this new program that's now available, the Regional Conservation Partnership Programs that's available under the Farm Bill, which is hundreds of millions of dollars that's now available competitively, it's not earmarked, competitively for farmers to be able to do what Mr. Suching did, similar type of programs to help themselves and help our environment so that we can have a safer environment for our community. Working together, we can have a cleaner environment and successful agriculture. There's now new tools available. We want people to know about it. We want farmers to know about it. We want conservation districts to get this information out to our farming community. Because quite frankly, Mr. President, agriculture is critical to Maryland. It's critical to New Jersey. It's critical to this country. It's the largest single part of our local economy, and I expect it's the same in New Jersey and around the nation. We want a viable agriculture. We outcompete the world in production. We want to be able to continue to do that, but we also want to pass on a cleaner environment to our children. We can do both. Thanks to the leadership of Senator Stabenow, thanks to the leadership of this body, we now have new tools available to help our farmers in conservation. I hope they'll take advantage of it for the sake of our environment and for the sake of agriculture.